Hey guys, in today's video, we are going to learn about selectors. So we're going to get quite advanced in today's session. So we're going to basically learn how to define selectors, how to tweak them, how to manipulate them, because basically selectors are very important and able to identify UI elements on a screen. So they seem a little bit intimidating at first, but you don't really need to understand what every property in a selector means. You just need to know how to use it and which properties are most important to look out for. So I'm going to be showing you all of that in today's video. All right, so what we're going to be doing in today's video is we are going to be typing in a location here in the search bar of booking.com. Then we are going to select a date. All right, so we're going to select a from date and a to date, and then of course click the search bar at the end. So basically this seems like something that's pretty simple, but selecting dates on a calendar is actually quite a technical selector that you have to use. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. All right, so let's open up UiPath Studio. So I'm going to click process here, and I'm going to call this calendar selection. Cool. I'll save that in my D drive under robots. Cool. And let's click create. Cool. I'll click here open main workflow. So we can start off by dragging in an attach window or attach browser. All right, so I'll drag that in, and I'm going to click indicate browser on screen, and then I'm going to select this entire browser just like that. All right, so let's have a look at our selector for our attached browser. So we can see the app is Chrome because it's in Google Chrome, and then the title, so that's the title that's on the top of the browser over there. All right, booking.com, pipe, official site, etc. So that's where this title comes from. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace all this on the right hand side of booking.com with a wildcard, just like that. So just in case the developers do decide to change this title, then the bot will still work as long as we are on booking.com and as long as it starts with booking.com over there. Cool, so I'll click validate. You'll see it's still green, so it's still recognizing the browser correctly, and I'll click OK. So that's usually good practice. Usually good practice is also to just add a wildcard in the beginning of the URL. So if they decide to add anything in the beginning part, it'll still work as well. So if I validate that, it'll also work. Cool. So we have now attached to booking.com. Now the next step is to use a type into activity to type into this where are you going search box. All right, so I'm going to come to my activities and let's drag in a type into. There it is, the type into activity. I'll drag it into the do sequence, indicate element inside browser, and I'll select the search box. Cool, so I'm going to click 3 lines, the menu icon, and I'll click edit selector over here. So here we can see what the selector looks like. So clearly what this does is it has this HTML line of code, which is basically referring to what the app is. In this case, the app we're referencing is Google Chrome. The title is booking.com, and you can see it's pulling this entire line from the attached browser. You'll also see this is highlighted in gray, and if you double click, you can't edit that. That's because it's being pulled directly from our selector over here in our attached browser. All right, so that's what that is over there. Then the second line, we have the property ID, and that is equal to SS. All right, so that basically means that the way the developers set up this website is that they gave this search box the ID SS, and then that's how they reference it. And then the tag is an input. All right, so that's the type of property or the type of UI element this is. This is a input, this is a button property, this is a drop-down field, that's a search field. That's basically what this tag is referring to here. So we can keep input, that's fine, that's not going to change. But the ID does sometimes change. So I'm just going to click open in UI Explorer. In a case like this, I don't think that ID is going to change, but I usually highly recommend to not reference any IDs when using selectors. And the reason for that is because IDs are dynamic. So if you refresh the page, sometimes the ID will change. In this case, I don't think it will, but what you would usually do in that case, you'd uncheck ID and you'd select class. All right, so one of the most commonly used properties I like to use that works reliably is class, parent class, and the name. All right, the name sometimes called rname. So yeah, those are the three main ones that I like to use. And then other ones like tag, if it's relevant, then I usually keep it in. So I unchecked the ID and I checked the class. We can validate that to make sure it's still working and click highlight. Yes, it's still recognizing the box correctly. So we can click save and we can come and click OK. So we have now defined our selector for the type into, and over here we can then type something like New York. All right, so that's the location. And then lastly, we can come and check simulate type. All right, what that's going to do is it's going to type in New York in the background as opposed to the foreground. Best practice is to check simulate type. If simulate type doesn't work, you can uncheck that and check send window messages. If that one also doesn't work, then uncheck both, and then the normal default way of typing into, or then the default way will work. So I'll just keep it to our true over here. And what I want to do is I'm just going to come here and run this, and let's see if it types New York into our field. There you go, it worked. So it typed New York. If I click on this calendar button here, all right, we can see it then closes that drop down and opens this little pop-up here. And then this is where you can select your dates. All right, so it seems like just by clicking around here, you can click anywhere inside this field. It looks like this is just one button. All right, so let's now move on and go to a click activity so we can click on that to open it. So I'll come to click and drag in a click activity, indicate element, and well, you look at that. So it looks like it's actually two separate buttons according to the UI elements. All right, so in the front end, we just thought it was one button, but it's actually two separate UI elements over here. So I'm going to click, say, on this first one, and let's come and have a look at the selector. Cool, so here's the rname property. All right, we can see that's blank. That doesn't look really helpful. Index is 1, parent ID, and tag. All right, so this doesn't look like such a reliable selector. It looks like it does validate and it does work, but we want something that is actually able to recognize the element properly. So we can go to open in UI Explorer. Cool, and here we have the unselected items. So just note, if I scroll down to the bottom here, this is the level of div we are currently on. And you can actually check and uncheck ones at higher levels as well. So over here, it currently has the rname, parent ID, and tag checked, and then it has all of these unchecked. So I'm going to uncheck rname since it doesn't seem helpful. And let me uncheck parent ID, and let me check class, all right, because I like to check the class. And we can see here by checking class, it adds an index of 1. All right, that's most likely because there were two classes, so it needs to assign an index to differentiate between the two. So if I click validate and highlight, we can see it identifies that. I just want to show you here, if I change this to a 2, it's most likely going to recognize the one next to that. So I'll validate that, highlight that, and you can see it now highlights the second one. All right, so that's basically what this means. So I'm going to keep this to a 1. I think if you have it as a 1 or a 2, it's still going to work, but I'll just keep it to 1 in this case. So you could also select other properties like the CSS selector or the parent ID, but looks like having it like this works just fine. So I'll click save. Cool. And we can click OK. Great. So now what we have set up, it will basically attach to booking.com. It'll then type in New York, and then it'll click this box and it'll open this. So now the next step is to select a date a from date and a to date. So let's just give this a test. Let's say we take June 23rd and July 15th. All right, so it looks like it closes that box as soon as the second date is selected. All right, so let's try again. Let's go 18 to August 12th. Cool. All right, so that seems pretty user-friendly. So let me see what happens. Maybe it might be a good idea to actually double-click the first date and then single-click the second date. I think it'll just work more reliably like that. Cool, so let's do that. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag in an assign activity. And I'm going to create a variable, Control K, and I'm going to call this the from date. Enter to create it, and then add a string, and then I'm going to put a date. Let's say 20th of June 2020. And let's drag in another assign, and let's say the to date. Ooh, need to click Control K to create one. To date. All right, and then let's say something like 15th of August 2020. Great, so I'm going to just rename these assign from date and then assign to date. We can see here in our variables that the from date and to date are both of types string, which is what we want, and they are in the sequence scope. Right, that's referring to this sequence. I'm just going to rename this to the main sequence just so it's easier to reference. Cool, so now we can see it's main there. And just note, you can get these two inputs from anywhere. Let's say you are referencing it from an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can basically just store the data into variables. Or maybe if you want to use a input dialog activity to get the date from the user, you can do it that way too, or whatever your use case is. In this case, this is just placeholders for now. All right, so we have the from date and we have the to date. So now let's see, how are we going to select 20th of June 2020? All right, so we want to click on June 2020, but we want the selector to be dynamic enough for no matter what date we pick or enter into that to date variable that it'll select the correct one. So let's do that. So first thing we need is a click activity. So I'll drag in a click, I'll put it there. I'm just going to rename this click to basically open calendar. And I'm just going to call this one type location. Cool. And then here we are clicking the from date. So I'm going to click indicate element inside browser, and I'm just going to select a random one. Okay, let's go with the 20th. So you can see we can either select the number itself or the entire block. I'm going to select the entire block. All right, and let's come and edit the selector. So looking at the properties here, the tag is a table, all right? So that's the format of this calendar. This is recognized as a table with columns and rows, right? And that's what these properties over here represent. Table column 7, table row 4. Right, so column 7, row 4. Let's have a look at what that is. Column 7 is, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And the 20 is in column 7, and row 4. So clearly row 1 starts with this at the top. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then that's how they get to this 20 over here. All right, so you can use the table column and row values to identify numbers, but that's not ideal. We want our selector to have the actual number 20 inside it so that we can reference it properly. All right, so I'm going to come to open in UI Explorer. All right, so there's the R name. Let's see if there's any value inside there. It looks like it's all blank in this case, but let me scroll down. It looks like here there's a inner text, so that's actually what we want. So usually the text inside a field, it's either stored in the inner text or the R name, which is basically the name of the property or the field. Cool, so that's good to know that we have the inner text over here, so we can reference the date itself. So let's check that property. And then the table column and row, we're not going to be using that. So I'm going to uncheck table column and table row. First, let's check our class. All right, it's always good to check our class property. And let's just uncheck this tab index, see if it makes a difference. And what is this tag? Let's try uncheck that. So let's validate that, see if it works. Right, usually you want this to be as clean as possible. You don't want a million different properties. You want it to be as simple as possible that still works and identifies the UI element correctly. Cool, so we can see here it does add an index. So that means there are two tables. So in this row, it says the tag is table and index is 1. So that's most likely because there are two tables. Table 1, this is index 1, and table 2, index 2. So let me just demonstrate that to you. Validate and highlight. There you go. It highlights in red the 20 on table 1. Let's try change this 20 to a different number, see if it works. Let's go 21. Validate that. Right, highlight. There you go. It recognizes 21. So that's great. Then we know this is working fine. So I'm just going to save this. But one thing we didn't do is we didn't reference the month, all right, because the date which is the 20th could be referencing June, it could be July, and it could be any other month of the year. So basically what we actually want to do is we want to manipulate the selector to contain the month somehow. So let me show you how to do that. We come here, open in UI Explorer. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look here in this set over here if there's anything where we can see the date or the month value. So I'm looking for something which says June on the right hand side. All right, these are the keys and these are the values. So we want to see June in the values over here. So I couldn't find it here, so now I'm moving up a level and let's see if I see June anywhere. Doesn't look like it. Let's move on. No June over there. Move up. Inner text, what is that? Doesn't look like that helps. Nothing. Oh, look, there's June. All right, so that's good. So we found a selector which has the month name in it, which is great because we want to reference that. So I'm going to now check this box. All right, and now it adds this line to our selector. And we want to make sure that we have our inner text property checked. All right, here it's got this CSS selector and all that. Like I said, we don't like to work with CSS selectors. Sometimes you have to because it's your only option. But parent ID, I'll uncheck that and I'll check class. All right, because class is usually quite reliable. All right, so let's see. So now we have tag div. That's usually fine. That doesn't usually change. Class, then we have the class name, inner text, that whole thing. So let's just validate this, see what happens. So it validates, highlight, it recognizes the date correctly. So that's good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete all the space on the left, all that white space, and replace it with a asterisk, which is a wildcard. And then I'm going to delete all this on the right hand side. Looks like that's taking quite a while. See if I can highlight it till the end. Clearly not. There you go. So I'll just delete all of this. There's already an asterisk at the end there, so I'll just close that off. There you go. So now basically, if this inner text contains the word June, then it's now able to reference the June calendar month. I have the asterisk on the left and the right hand side just for all the other characters and white space. So we can validate that and highlight. That's good. Seems to validate. All right, so basically it's important to have here in the selector to have tab index which is -1 to make sure to include that selector. When you do that, it's able to recognize the date in either column 1 or 2. All right, so let's say we come to August. All right, now because we're on August, it shouldn't be able to recognize August, because, or let's rather come here to September. It now shouldn't validate for August. Let's see, there you go, it doesn't validate, But if I type here September, then it should validate. Great, there you go, validated. So basically this is our selector we want to use, so that's perfect. So what we can do is just click save, right, come back here and click OK. Right, so what this click from date is going to do is, at the way it's currently set up, is it's always going to click 18th of September. Let me just delete that white space over there. Cool, validate. So what we wanted to do is to always select the date which is set in this from date over here. So that means we're going to have to break up this date into its components to get the day, the 20, and the month June. So what we can do is we can just split it using an assign, right? And I'm going to create a variable, Control K, and I'm going to call it the from day, all right? And the from day is basically the 20 over there. So to extract that, I'm just going to open the expression editor. What you can do is you can use the from date variable, all right? There you go. And we can say dot split, all right? We can use the split method, and then open bracket, close bracket, and then put double quotes, a space, and a C. So the space is acting as a delimiter to convert this into an array where the separator is a space. So now it'll be a 3-part array with item 20, item June, and item 2020, which we'll be able to pull out by the indexes. So the first index would be index position 0, and index position 0 over here is now referencing the 20 over there. If we change it to a 1, it'll reference the month June, and if we change it to a 2, it'll reference 2020. Cool, so that's fine as is. We can just click OK, and there we have our from day variable created. It's a string, so that is good. I'm also going to then create our from month, so I can drag in, or actually let's just copy paste this, copy paste. I'll change this from day. I'll create a new variable, call it from month, enter, and then over here we'll just change this index position to a 1. All right, so that'll pull the month. Perfect. So usually it's good to test this. Let's just test it quickly, but it should work. I'll just drag in a message box over here for our from day, and then I'll drag in another message box for our from month. So let's just run this and see if it pops up correctly. There is our 20, great, okay, and there is June, great. That's perfect. Well, it seems like it just carried on running there, but that's fine. So I'm going to delete these message boxes. That was just for demonstration purposes, just to check, and testing purposes, just to test that it's working. Cool, so we have our from month and our from day. So I'll call this assign day, or let's say from day to be more specific, and assign from month. So now what you want to do is you want to add these variables into our selector. So if we come to our click from date and I come here, edit selector, we have the day over here, which is 18. So I'm going to delete that 18 and I'm going to click Control space. And then you'll see it gives us all the options to choose our variables over here. So we want to choose our from day variable. So I'll click OK. And you'll see it adds these double braces and then the name of our variable. And then we can do the same thing over here for the month. Oh, deleted the wildcard. There you go. And then from month. There you go. Now, another thing I would also just recommend you do is over here, I would just add a space before and after the variable, because basically, if say the day is a 2, right, it might confuse the selector between the date, which is say the 2 over here, or the 22 or the 21 or something like that. So it's good to put a space before and after so we know where the number starts and where the number ends. All right, or else the wildcard could replace any other number. So let's say, for example, if it looked like this, right, and the day was a 2, then this wildcard could actually replace any of these numbers. It could that wildcard can represent any character or number. So it could be a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or nothing, which would just be this one over here. So now that would confuse the selector and it wouldn't know which one to select. And usually what it will do is it'll select the first one. So in our case, we'll be lucky and it'll still select the number 2, but it's usually just better practice to leave those spaces there so we know where the numbers start and end. Great, so I'll click OK, and that's fine. Just a note, if you try validate this, it's not going to validate, and that's because these variables over here don't have any values in. All right, they're blanks at the moment. They're just null values. All right, because they're being referenced from something else. But when we run it, it will be able to reference correctly. So let's run this. Let's see. So we had this set to 20 June. Let's just change this to something like 22 June. All right, and I'm going to refresh this. Cool, and let's run this and see what happens. There you go. And look at that, it worked nicely. So it basically typed New York, then it clicked here, opened our calendar, and it selected 22 June accurately. That's perfect. So that worked just as we expected. Right, so remember earlier I mentioned we want to double click the from date. So let's change this from date from a single click to a double click. All right, I think it'll work the same, but it's just always better practice. Just for the first date, you select to double click it so it knows it's the first date. Cool. Now, next step is to select the second date. But before we get to that, I just want to point out that if the month isn't currently showing over here, right, then it's going to run into an error. So like, let's say the date was the 22nd of August, which is over here. If we were back here, it would actually run into an error. So let me show you that as an example. So I'm going to change this June to August. Cool. And I'm going to refresh this. Just like that. And let's now come and run this file. Okay, so now it types that in. Oh, I think my pointer was in the way of things. I'm just going to restart this. Also, I'm just going to come and change the timeout over here just to make it shorter so we don't wait too long for this to run into an error. So I'll change that to 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. Continue on error, I'll leave unchecked for now so that it'll run into an error after 3 seconds. All right, so just make sure that's refreshed and let's run that. There you go. So 1, 2, 3, and there's our error. Cool, so we can see here now it's saying click from date, which is this click activity. It ran into an error because it can't find 22, and does it have August? Yes, it does. There's August over there. So you can see it's struggling to find the 22nd of August, and that's because obviously it's not visible on the screen. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set up a system which will click this little next chevron over here to basically click on the correct one. So if it can't find it, it must click next until it is able to find that date. So let me show you how to set that up. What you can do is we can use a while loop. All right, so we can drag in a while, and the condition can be something like while retry next Control K. I'll call this retry next month, just for the lack of a better name. I'll just call it that. All right, retry next month. And what we're going to do is we are going to use a try catch activity. All right, so I'll drag in a try catch into here. So what it'll try to do is to click on that respective date. Okay, so I'll drag that into there. And if it is unable to find it, it must then click on the next on the next button or that chevron. So that means here under the catch, I'll select a system exception, and then we can drag in that over here. So I'll add in a click activity, which will then click on the next arrow, which is this little chevron here. It'll click that button if it runs into an error. So that is the catch over here. So I'm going to click next month, and let's have a look at our selector. All right, it's using the CSS, which isn't good. So let's just go edit that in the UI Explorer. Cool. And let's select, looks like there's no class property. So we'll just make sure our parent class is checked. Unselect the CSS, the parent ID, FRM, maybe let's uncheck that, see if that works. That works fine. All right, tag SVG highlight. Okay, yeah, that seems to be fine. All right, SVG, it's just like an image. All right, we can click save. So it's an icon basically. I'll click OK. Great, so that's fine. Let's also just make sure simulate click is checked over here. And also for this click activity, we want to check simulate click. All right, so now what we want to do is set up the condition for this retry next month. So the while loop runs while the condition is true. So when it starts, we want this to be true, which means we must set our retry next month. We can see it's a Boolean over there. We must set that to true as the default value. So when it starts, it's true, which means we are retrying the next month. It doesn't mean it's clicking the next button, but it just means it's going to run this body, which means it's going to try and click on the date. If it can't find the date, it'll then catch it and click the next button and loop again. All right, so over here, we'll set the scope to a main as well. And that seems to be fine. Let's now drag in an assign activity, which means if it is able to click on this, so if this doesn't run into an error, then that means we don't want to retry this while loop, which means we want it to end. So we'll need to set our retry next month to false, just like that. All right, so that means if this runs into an error, this won't be attempted. So then it's not going to assign retry next month to false. It will still remain on true, which was our default value. Then it'll come to the exception. It'll then click this next button. The default value will still be true, and it'll then retry next month, which means it'll try this body again, and it'll try click this again, and it'll keep going and keep clicking next until it finds the correct month. Cool. So let's now test this out and see if it's actually working. All right. So we had this set to August. Let's just go for a later date. Let's say September, 22nd of September. Right, and I'm going to refresh this page, and let's try now run this and see what happens. All right, so it should now click next. There you go, it found it. Did you see that? There is the 22nd of September. It selected it correctly, so that's fantastic. So we have basically now managed to set this up for our from date, and we'd basically just do the exact same thing for our to date. All right, so we have our to date here. We'd basically repeat that entire process. So I can actually do that now quickly. I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. So I'll just copy paste these activities. All right, assign today and assign 2 month. From day, we can change this to Control K for a new variable, today, and from month, delete that, Control K, and make that 2 month. This from date should now reference the to date, so I'll delete that, replace it with the to date, and then this from date, replace it with the to date. Where's to date? There it is. Cool, so that's done. Now I'm just going to scroll down a bit. I'm going to have to copy this and paste the while loop. All right, so now we have 2 whiles, so let's just rename them. This first one will be select from month, from date, and then the second while will be select to date. Cool. Now I'm going to have another retry next month over here. So I'll delete that and Control K. Retry next month. Let's put a _2 because this is for the to date. All right, it's bad naming convention, but it's fine. Then we should probably just rename this one the retry next month _from. All right, so that should now change all the variables where it's used. Cool. Next we have the click from date. So let's call this the click to date. The to date, we don't want to double click, we want to single click this one. So we can select single click, and then we can open the selector over here. Edit selector. Right, this from month should now be the to month variable, and this from day should now be the to day variable. Click OK. And over here, we can assign over here the retry next month to. Cool. And then over here, I believe nothing will change here. I think this will be exactly the same. Yeah, so that is basically it. So now it should be able to select the from and the to date properly. So we always just want to make sure our from date is before our to date. So let's say from date is the, let's say June, let's say 30th of June, 2020. And our to date, where's our to date? Here it is. Let's make that the, I don't know, let's say the 18th of December. Have a nice long holiday. Cool. So that should be it. I'm just going to come refresh this. And let's try and run this. So it looks like we ran into an error there. So let's just see what happened. So output panel looks like nothing is happening there. What did it do? It just selected June. It didn't look like it even tried to click next to get to December over here. So it means there's a error going on somewhere. Let's just have a look. What could the problem be? Oh, over here, our condition, retry next month. I don't think we set a default value. So retry next month. From we had a default, over here we didn't. Make sure it's true, and of course also set the scope to the main scope. Cool. So now I think that should fix that problem. Once again, let's just refresh that. And let's try and run this. So there you go. It's now clicking next. We currently have the timeout set to 3 seconds. So if we want that next chevron button to happen quicker, we can just decrease that time. All right. So there you go. Let's see what happened. Did it select the date? 18 December and 30th of June. I think that's right, if my memory serves correctly. 18 December and 30 June. Perfect. So it worked just as we expected. We'll change the timeout over here on the click to date to something less than 3 seconds. So let's say 1 second, 1000 milliseconds. We'd change it on both. 1000. Perfect. And then also last thing we want to do is we actually want to search. So we can click the search button. So after this while loop, we can drag in a click activity, which will click on the search. Let's make sure our select is fine. All right, parent ID is FRM, tag is button, type submit. All right, let's just open UI selector. All right, it's not good. Let's just have a look, see if we can select the, okay, yeah, so there's our name, so we can select our name, that's a nice one, and so is class. Then I would probably just unselect parent ID. Validate that, highlight. Cool, that worked good. Save. Okay, so I'll just rename this click button to click search. Nice. So now let's run this for a final time, and we can set anything we want. Let's say instead of New York, we want to go somewhere else. We can say, let's say we go to London. Right, and let's try and run this file. So going to London between the 30th of June, and you can see now it just takes 1 second instead of 3 seconds to click the next one. There you go, and then search. All right, so it looks like it just ran into an error because it says reservations for more than 30 nights are not possible. So that's all right for now, but that's basically it. So I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope it helped you better understand selectors. I know a lot of people often ask the question on how to select buttons in a calendar, right? Something like this, because it is quite complex. It's not as simple as clicking a search button, because you need to use variables in your selectors and all that. But yeah, I hope that helped you. If you like this video, please give this video a like and leave a comment down below if you enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.